Etayor Today reading from chapter 5, verse number 1. Arjuna uvāca sannyāsaṁ karmaṇāṁ kṛṣṇa punar yogaṁ śaṁsasi chreya etayor ekaṁ brūhi su-niścitam arjuna uvāca sannyāsaṁ karmaṇāṁ kṛṣṇa yogaṁ śaṁsasi chreya etayor ekaṁ
sannyāsaṁ karmaṇaṁ kṛṣṇa punar yogaṁ ca śaṁsasi chreya etayor ekaṁ brūhi su-niścitam arjuna uvāca sannyāsaṁ karmaṇaṁ kṛṣṇa yogaṁ ca śaṁsasi chreya etayor ekaṁ brūhi su-niścitam
sannyāsaṁ karmaṇaṁ kṛṣṇa punar yogaṁ ca śaṁsasi chreya etayor ekaṁ brūhi su-niścitam.
Arjuna uvāca. Arjuna said, sannyāsaṁ, renunciation, karmaṇāṁ, of all activities, kṛṣṇa, O kṛṣṇa, punar, again, yogaṁ, devotional service, also, śaṁsasi, you are praising. Yet, which chreya is more beneficial. Etayor, of these two, ekaṁ, one, that may unto me, brūhi, please tell, su-niścitam, definitely. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Arjuna said, O Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial? Please repeat. Arjuna said, O Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work. And then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial? In this 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that work in devotional service is better than dry mental speculation. Devotional service is easier than the latter because, being transcendental in nature, it frees one from reaction. In the 2nd chapter, preliminary knowledge of the soul and its entanglement in the material body were explained. How to get out of this material engagement by buddhi yoga, or devotional service, was also explained therein. In the 3rd chapter, it was explained that a person who is situated on the platform of knowledge no longer has any duties to perform. And in the 4th chapter, the Lord told Arjuna that all kinds of sacrificial work culminate in knowledge. However, at the end of the 4th chapter, the Lord advised Arjuna to wake up and fight, being situated in perfect knowledge. Therefore, by simultaneously stressing the importance of both work in devotion and inaction in knowledge, Krishna has perplexed Arjuna and confused his determination. Arjuna understands that renunciation in knowledge involves cessation of all kinds of work performed as sense activities. But if one performs work in devotional service, then how is work stopped? In other words, he thinks that sannyāsaṁ, or renunciation in knowledge, should be altogether free from all kinds of activity, because work and renunciation appear to him to be incompatible. He appears not to have understood that work in full knowledge is non-reactive and is therefore the same as inaction. He inquires, therefore, whether he should cease work altogether or work with full knowledge. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prabhupada Nirvishesha Srimati Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama. Arjuna here is confused. And he is being deliberately confused by Krishna. Krishna wants him to be confused. Now that may seem to be very contradictory. But so many things will happen in our lives which may be difficult, may be challenging, may be practically seemingly impossible to perform. And this is given to us by Krishna. Because Krishna here is confusing Arjuna because we are confused. We can only understand the teachings of Krishna from someone in a similar position. Just like Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Prabhupada went through grihastha life. They didn't have to go through grihastha life. It wasn't a requirement, it wasn't necessary, it wasn't karma. But it was to teach the majority of people who go through grihastha life how to do it properly. And so So Krishna gives us so many challenges. And here, one of the greatest challenges, how to resolve apparent conflicts. This is something very, very important in Krishna consciousness. Because in the different steps in ascending toward Krishna, there are so many things that appear to be conflicted, difficult to resolve. But actually they're all resolvable when one sees the beauty of Krishna. Just like Dhruva Maharaj, he was perplexed. He thought the solution to the evil-minded or the cruel-minded, cruel mentality of my stepmother is, and the submission of my father, not taking me into account. This is something that's very common to us. We think, here's a conflict, and the solution is, get rid of the other person. So Dhruva Maharaj thought, I'll show my father. I'll become more powerful. This was his solution. And our solution, usually to the conflicts that we have to enter into, is the same, as is stated here in this verse. Chreya, etayor, ekaṁ. Etayor means both. Ekaṁ, there must be only one solution. This is the black and white mentality of the conditioned soul. There must be only one solution. There must be only one way. Of course, in Gita Mahatmya, it says that Krishna consciousness is the one way. But within Krishna consciousness, there's so much variety. Just like when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to South India and he went to the Sri Rangam temple and met with Vyaṅkatapata. So Vyaṅkatapata, he told Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that, no, Krishna comes from Vishnu. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, no, actually, Vishnu comes from Krishna. And Krishna comes from Vishnu. But between the two, if you go back far enough and you understand properly, you'll understand that even though technically Krishna comes from Vishnu, in essence, Vishnu comes from Krishna. And then, Vyaṅkatapata was a great scholar, so he argued the point. And Mahaprabhu said, let us take the example of Lakshmi Devi. Lakshmi Devi, she is eternally massaging the lotus feet of Vishnu. And the lotus feet of Vishnu are the goal of everyone's life. Essentially, because we don't understand that, or we don't practice it. We may understand it, but we don't practice it. Even Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he went to Gaya to see the lotus feet of Vishnu, and hearing the glorification of the lotus feet of Vishnu, he became overwhelmed with ecstatic love. So they're very wonderful. So then Mahaprabhu said, so why is it that she left the lotus feet of Vishnu to try to enter into the rasa dance of Krishna? She's already situated in the most perfect position for a Vishnu Bhakta. She is the point of admiration for all Vishnu Bhaktas. She is like eternally situated at the lotus feet of Krishna. Just like the gopis, they accused the flute, or they admired and at the same time accused the flute of Krishna. How can you be so greedy to always dominate the lips of Krishna? Krishna's lotus lips are so wonderful. And you are so fortunate. Therefore, it must be that your ancestors trained you well. And they also performed so many pious activities. The bamboo that grows on the Yamuna. It must be very, very special, that bamboo, because they had you for a son. And you, because of their pious activities, have achieved the lips of Krishna. So the same way that, of course they said, it's very unusual that he's a male. And we're females. And we don't get this opportunity. He's a male. And he's always at your Lord. We get every once in a while we get some. We're able to taste some little nectar from you, then it's gone. But this flute, there's a little bit of a complaint, admiration, complaint. On the same way, Lakshmi Devi, she has full access to the lotus feet of Vishnu, which are the shelter of every living entity. The demigods, when they pray to Kṛṣṇa in the 5th canto, not to Kṛṣṇa but to Vishnu, they say that your lotus feet is the supreme shelter, which you give to everyone even if they don't want it. So Lakshmi Devi had, but she left. But when she got to the rasa dance, her mind became disturbed. She was observing that there is apparent irreverence. That these gopis are not going for your lotus feet. They want to embrace you. They want to dance with you. They don't want to massage you. This is not. I can't deal with this. So this was Mahaprabhu's argument, and therefore she went back to Lord Vishnu. And then so they argued some more. And then finally, Jagatavata accepted Lord Chaitanya that Achinta Veda Vedata, that there are more than one truth in any situation. And they have to be understood from different angles of vision. And then Lord Chaitanya said, do you know why Lakshmi Devi could not enter? And Jagatavata said, well, because you just explained it because she couldn't understand. And no, because she did not take shelter of the gopi. No one can enter into the rasa dance of Kṛṣṇa without taking shelter of the gopi. This is an impossible situation. So, Lord Chaitanya, he explained, he showed that yes, Vishnu is supreme. And Kṛṣṇa technically comes from Vishnu when he incarnates in this world 4,500 years ago at that time. But Kṛṣṇa is the origin of Vishnu. Why? Because rasa, the feeling of devotion, is more intense with Kṛṣṇa than with Vishnu. It becomes more intense. So intense that all reverence and all admiration all disappear in the wonderful loving relationships that the devotees enjoy with Kṛṣṇa. Those relationships cannot be imitated. So much so that Nanda Gopakumar, when he saw Lord Vishnu, he ran up to embrace him. And the Vishnu Dutas, the Vishnu Bhaktas that was disturbing to their mind. How can anyone go up to Vishnu? Vishnu can embrace you, but you can't embrace Vishnu. I mean, that's the rule in Vaikuntha. Vishnu can come up and embrace you, but you don't go and embrace Vishnu. But Nanda Gopakumar, he didn't understand it. As my Lord, I run and embrace him. Because he was seeing the Lord from a more intimate point of view. So therefore Arjuna is complaining here to Kṛṣṇa, because we're also complaining to Kṛṣṇa. Why is this like this? Why is this like this? Why am I not happy? Why don't you give me this? Why don't you do this for me? Why did you put me in this situation? And Srila Prabhupada, he also appeared to make a complaint like that. He said when he came to when he was docked off the shore, just ready to enter into Boston, he saw all these cars going to and fro. And in that time in India, there was like, you saw a car every once in a while. And there were very few cars. They were all ambassadors. And all didn't work very well either. Prabhupada saw all these cars going there. Prabhupada said, my dear Lord, why have you brought me here? I can't understand why you brought me here. Well, how will these people understand your intimate transcendental pastimes when they're so engrossed in the modes of passionate ignorance? But I know that you brought me here for some reason, therefore let me understand. And just make me dance like a puppet. I am a puppet in your hand. I am your servant. Make me dance, make me dance, make me dance. And And Arjuna is actually, although there's a little bit of a challenge here, there's a little bit of a bewilderment, when he says, tanme brūhi su-niścitam, these two statements he made in the second chapter, very similar. Yat-chreya su-niścitam brūhi tanme. That yat-chreya, the same as he says here, that please tell me which one is more beneficial. Otherwise he says, what is the most beneficial thing to me? And then he says, same here, tam brūhi su-niścitam. Tell me clearly what is more beneficial. Yat-chreya su-niścitam brūhi tanme. Tell me very clearly. I want to know very clearly. So this is called surrender. This surrender can only be achieved when we go beyond our bewilderment. We go beyond our senses and our mind and our intelligence. We go beyond our feelings, which come from our conditioned nature. And we put our hands, we put our lives, we put our very existence in Krishna's hands. We put everything before Krishna. So Arjuna, on the one hand, is expressing bewilderment, but he's also expressing the solution to that bewilderment. Just tell me definitely what is best for you. So, he goes on in the next, then Krishna takes over. And he says that actually you haven't understood what I said. What he explained in the third chapter about this, and therefore Srila Prabhupada mentions. In the second chapter, Krishna explained about self-realization, and that one should be situated in self, and he repeated that in the third chapter, one verse number 17. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. Otherwise, there is no work. He's telling Arjuna to work, but he's saying actually there is no work. Otherwise, the work that I'm prescribing is not work. It is devotional service. It is Krishna consciousness. And then he seemed to repeat the same thing, and Srila Prabhupada makes emphasis of this. In verse 41, on the previous chapter, yoga sannyāsaṁ karmaṇāṁ, that one should renounce the fruits of his activities and destroy one's doubts. But then in the next verse, the previous verse which we read yesterday, he says, Atito tishta bharata, now you should stand up and fight. So Arjuna is saying, well, wait a minute, which one of these two? But what Krishna is saying is, you have to do both of them. And you recommend work with devotion. So how to combine these two things? We discussed briefly yesterday. How to combine work in devotion and transcendental knowledge. This was the subject of perplexity for Ramananda Roy when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requested him, please explain the goal of life. And he explained so many things, one after another, from Bhagavad Gita. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu rejected them one after another. Of course, first he explained from the Vishnu Purana that Varnashram is the supreme goal, because Varnashram orients everyone toward service to the supreme goal. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I cannot accept this because this means that one is still under the modes of nature. So then Ramananda Roy said, okay, then just working for the Lord in any circumstance. This is the goal of life. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, no, this is karma yoga. And then he said, Sarvanamam Parityāja Mam ekaṁ sharanam vraja. This is the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, this is, it's good to surrender, but surrender can be apparently achieved externally. But how can we be sure that it's internally? Otherwise, if one just seems to give up all actions but maintains something within their heart, some conception, then the surrender will be incomplete. Therefore, I can't accept it. Just like when Raghunath Bhatta Goswami was coming traveling from Varanasi to come to surrender to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he finally received permission. When he was a young boy, he requested Mahaprabhu, please, accept me as your servant. He said, you're a young boy, you should learn. You learn from your father. And then finally he requested, he wrote to Mahaprabhu, please allow me to come and surrender to your lotus feet. So finally he gave him permission. And on the way, he met one Ramdas. We have our Ramdas here. There's another Ramdas. And so this Ramdas said, please let me accompany you and let me carry you're a very accomplished Brahmin. I'm a simple Brahmin. You're a very learned Brahmin. Let me become your servant. Raghunath Bhatta said, no, but he insisted. When they arrived with Mahaprabhu rejected Ramdas. Because although he appeared to be very surrendered, he was still perplexed by impersonal understanding. And Mahaprabhu showed later on that he simply wanted to merge into Kṛṣṇa. He was perplexed. And so, therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't accept Ramananda's proposition. And then he said, Brahmabhuta prasanatma ashuratina pamshati. He's thinking Mahaprabhu has to accept this because mad bhaktir labhate param. By doing this, one can be elevated to the platform of devotional service. Yeah. Mahaprabhu rejected it, saying that this is Brahmabhuta, this is Brahman. This is not, one may be elevated to devotional service, and again one may not. And then he said, he quoted from Lord Brahma, that jnane prayasam udarapastu namante eva. That when you give up all pursuit of knowledge that is not directly related to Kṛṣṇa, then and you become fully absorbed in glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Mahaprabhu said, yes, this is the beginning of the goal. You have to give up all of your own conceptions, all of your false ego, which comes from knowledge. So therefore Krishna is saying the same thing here. Otherwise Mahaprabhu was basically repeating the argument that Krishna is giving here in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and all throughout Bhagavad Gita, that you have to understand the difference between transcendental knowledge and that knowledge which is acquired in this world. That knowledge which is acquired in this world will simply make us proud. And whenever we identify with the position, we think that I have more knowledge or I'm more qualified than another person, then there is conflict. Whenever I think that I'm more advanced, I'm more qualified, I'm more intelligent, I'm more devotional, I'm better at this, I'm better at that, then there will be conflict. But when we think, I am the servant of this person. Srila Prabhupada came to the West thinking that I am a servant of all these people. And he demonstrated it. He took such a humble attitude, such a surrendered attitude in relation to Krishna. That Krishna, you want these people to go back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, I will do anything and everything to make that happen. Srila Prabhupada didn't take a superior position. Srila Prabhupada in the beginning, took a humble position before very degraded persons. So how much can we learn from that example of Srila Prabhupada? How much can we learn? Because Krishna is the only person, the only authority in the three worlds that fuels a revolution against him. Because we're all rebelling against Krishna, and Krishna gives us all facility. You want to do a revolution? Go ahead. Do it. Here's all facility. I give you intelligence, strength, power, position. No. Because no one can do it. No one can do it. And therefore, Krishna gives us all that facility to show us that it's an impossible task. You cannot rebel against Krishna. And staying in this material world means that in spite of the fact that Krishna has given us all facility again and again to try to do it, and showed us that you cannot do it, and we still keep trying to do it. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada said again and again, this is called vimudha, very grateful. But we have the tendency to do it again and again and again and again. And this is the problem that we have here in Trinidad, in New York, in Delhi, everywhere, as conditioned souls. We want to blame everyone else. And Srila Prabhupada said, blaming everyone else means that we really want to blame Krishna. But because Krishna is more powerful than me, I'll blame someone else. They may not be more powerful than me. Let me find someone who's weaker than me and blame them. Let me find someone who has some faults that I can easily identify and blame them. That's much easier. If I blame Krishna, if I go up against Krishna, that's a big task. But actually, when we blame someone else, we should really analyze who am I really blaming? Because who is really in charge? Krishna says here, and he'll say, and we'll see it a little later in this particular chapter of Bhagavad Gita, especially starting with verse number 12, that and 12, 13, 14, 15, these verses explain how the modes of nature are moving everything in the material world. But who is in charge of the modes of nature? Krishna. So when you blame someone, you're blaming the modes of nature. But the modes of nature cannot be blamed, Krishna said, because we invited those modes of nature and we are constantly inviting those modes of nature to be in charge of our lives. So therefore, he is confusing Arjuna in this particular verse, so that Arjuna can take a position like us. Wait a minute, Krishna, is it this or that? What do you want? This, to show us now through the teachings of the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that this is a foolish position. That Krishna, with superior intelligence, can resolve these two things of working in devotion and transcendental knowledge. And they are not conflicted. They are perfectly compatible. But we have to understand through the knowledge that Krishna is giving us how to make them compatible. And this is what Srila Prabhupada is speaking about here. That if one performs work in devotional service, then how is work stopped? So, how work is stopped, how we deal with the situation in this material world, and how we work without working, how we cultivate knowledge without it being material knowledge, without there being anti-interference of the false ego. This is what Krishna is referring to here. And this is not an easy thing to resolve. And therefore Krishna takes this whole chapter and the whole Bhagavad Gita to explain it. Again and again. When I was in Dallas many years ago, maybe 1973, one professor, he came to me and he said, "Why does Srila Prabhupada say the same thing again and again? Can you recommend, among all of the books that you have in your Krishna consciousness repertoire, can you recommend one book that just gives the philosophy without any repetition?" That was his complaint. There's too much repetition. And I showed him that how Srila Prabhupada explains that repetition means that you must use repetition when you're dealing with a fool. Explaining the point. Well, if one is foolish, then you have to repeat something again and again. It's like a young child. One has to, they do something, then you say, don't do it, they do it again, you don't do it, you do it again, you don't do it. So I was explaining to him, as long as we're foolish, then Krishna has to repeat, as long as we keep identifying with the body. And then the professor said, "But I read Bhagavad Gita, I understand I'm not the body." But at the same time he was smoking a cigarette. And his hand was trembling like that. And I said, "You think you understand something about Bhagavad Gita, you can't even control your senses. Your hand is shaking, and you're smoking a cigarette, and you think that you've understood Bhagavad Gita." With his shaking hand, and looked at me. That's a good point. Put out his cigarette. But his hand was still shaking. And so I just explained to him very clearly that you need to hear this again and again. Otherwise, Srila Prabhupada is the pure devotee of the Lord. Just like there was another professor, and he asked Srila Prabhupada, "Can you please explain the esoteric pastimes of Radha and Krishna?" And Prabhupada said, "We are not here to talk about Radha and Krishna." Very surprised. And he said, "No, I'm just asking you." He thought Prabhupada maybe some language barrier here. So he said, he tried to explain it more eloquently, in more academic knowledge. Maybe the Swami doesn't understand. No, what I want to understand is about Radha and Krishna. And Prabhupada said, "Who are you?" "Oh, Professor so-and-so." "No, but who are you?" And he said, "Professor so-and-so." Prabhupada said, No. "Who are you?" And he couldn't say anything. So, "You are not the body. That is, you are spirit soul. Until you understand this." And the professor said the same thing as the other professor. But I understand this. So Prabhupada said, "So then why are you attached to this body? Otherwise, it's not theoretical understanding. You must act on the platform of the soul." And he said, until you do that, there's no question of Radha and Krishna. Until you understand this point, there's no question. Of course, we can speak something about Radha and Krishna. Srila Prabhupada did that. We do that. But if we want to really understand the pastimes of Shri Radha and Krishna, or the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then if we want to even chant the holy name properly, then we have to understand that I'm not this body. And that understanding means we have to live on the platform that I'm not this body, which is not an easy thing to do. So we have to keep applying this every day, this understanding. And every day, when we're chanting the holy name, we have to go beyond the body, which will constantly distract us from the holy name. This itch over here. And then when the body doesn't distract us, the mind will distract us. What about this? What are you going to do today? If you spend too much time chanting, there won't be enough time for doing all these other things that you have to do. And then the intelligence will enter in and try to interfere. That actually you already understand you're not this body. Actually you've already chanted so much. and you have to do these things. You can chant anytime, but you have to get this done, that done, that done. So much interference just to do something so simple as chanting the holy name. So, these distractions are the same thing. That this is what is being revealed here. That, please tell me, it has to be one or the other. It cannot be both. And when we enter into some disagreement, we say the same thing. I'm right, you're wrong. Very simple. Very simple formula. I've got it all figured out. I'm right and you're wrong. So, just agree with me and then we resolve the issue. And that's how we all think in this material world. That there's no other solution. But the other solution, which is Krishna consciousness, comes from worshipping Krishna properly, with the right attitude. And what is that right attitude? That right attitude, Krishna himself explained. We went over it yesterday. And one of the most important verses in Bhagavad Gita, Tad Vidi Pranipatena, that you approach Krishna with a submissive attitude, not with a challenging attitude. You inquire. Now, how do we inquire? If we're reading Bhagavad Gita, how do we inquire? We understand, okay, we're sitting here, someone is speaking, I can inquire. But how do I inquire when I sit down to read Bhagavad Gita? That's very easy. I sit down, I read the verse, and I think everything that Krishna is saying here is so important. Let me try to understand what Krishna is saying. So we're inquiring from Krishna. We're inquiring from Srila Prabhupada when we read his transcendental purport. And then it all makes very much sense. But if we're not in that mood, which was established, and Krishna establishes this mood again and again throughout Bhagavad Gita, that again in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that how will you understand this transcendental knowledge? That Prabhaksham Jana Suyave, that you have to be free from envy. If you're not free from envy, you will never understand. I'm going to reveal to you now something more transcendental, but you have to be free from envy. And free from envy means that you have to serve the Vaishnavas. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said there are 3 things you have to do that are essential in Krishna consciousness. And the first one, Vaishnava Seva. You have to serve the Vaishnava. And if you do that, then you can do the second thing. If you serve the Vaishnavas with the proper mood of devotion, then Nami Ruchi. Then you can begin to taste the holy name of Krishna. And if you really taste the holy name of Krishna, then you can do the third thing, which is the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that is Jivedori. You can feel compassion toward the living entity. But if you don't chant the holy name properly, you will never feel that compassion. And if you want to chant the holy name properly, then you have to serve the Vaishnava. It's not like you just sit down and chant in some automatic way, some mechanical way, and then eventually you will become Krishna conscious. If you want to chant the holy name, then you must serve the Vaishnava. You want to chant it properly. And if you want to carry out this mission that Srila Prabhupada established, you have to chant the holy name properly. So it all begins with our Vaishnava dealings. If our Vaishnava dealings are not proper, if we think, I'm going to preach, I'm going to show these other people how to preach. If there's pride, if there's some kind of thinking that I'm better, then you won't be able to preach. You may be able to explain something, some people may be impressed, but ultimately they will see this lack of humility, this lack of surrender, this lack of tolerance, the lack of all the qualities that are mentioned by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the lack of detachment from Dana Jana Sundari, from wanting to have wealth, position, and accompaniment of the opposite sex, wanting to enjoy fruitive activities. This is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if you want to chant the holy name purely, and from there carry out my mission, then you have to associate with my devotees. And you have to have a loving relationship. Association doesn't mean we just come together, have some prasadam and go away. It means there must be loving relationships. And what are those loving relationships? Dadati, pratigunati, guyam akati puchati. There must be a desire to serve those Vaishnavas, give them something. Every Vaishnava I see, let me give them something. Just like Rupa Goswami says, every time you come to the temple, you must bring a gift for the deity. Every time we come, we should bring a gift. And if we have no money, no resources, we should come and offer a prayer. Otherwise, it's not that everybody has enough money to bring a really nice gift, although you can always bring some flowers. Especially here in Trinidad, there's so many flowers to the deity. But you bring some prayer, some offering, some mantra, something that I offer to the deity. And whenever we see a Vaishnava, we should also think, how can I serve this Vaishnava? This is the way that we can make Krishna consciousness successful in our lives. And this is what is being explained here in his very first verse, that Arjuna is indicating to Krishna that you please tell me, although his approach is, well, it's got to be this or that, but his mood is proper. His approach is not, is by definition and by Krishna's arrangement, it's, black and white. There's some confusion, there's some misunderstanding, but his method is proper. Please tell me definitely what is the best path, what is the best thing to do. Without that mood, we cannot understand Bhagavad Gita. We can never enter into the mysteries of Bhagavad Gita. This was explained by Krishna later on in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, what is that verse? Aham evam vido Arjuna, yatum drashtum chitastvayena, bhavishtum nirvāna. That Krishna tells Arjuna that without undivided and pure devotional service offered to me, it is not possible to understand knowledge of me, to understand me, have knowledge of me, gyatum drashtum, to be able to see me, and what to speak of, to enter into the mysteries of my very existence. Impossible. You cannot do this, Arjuna, without pure, loving devotion to me. So Arjuna is beginning, as he did in the second chapter, tell me clearly what is best for me. But, as we mentioned yesterday, it's a gradual process. So Krishna is telling us clearly what is best for us, but sometimes we can't understand it. So now Arjuna is repeating again, I have full disposition and faith to accept what you're going to explain to me. So please explain it. So if we don't have that mood amongst ourselves, understood, that's my fault, that's my deficiency, that's my inadequacy. Therefore, Krishna, let me continue to inquire. And as long as we have that mood of continuing, being determined to understand from Krishna what is best for me, then Krishna will give us the opportunity again and again and again to perform or to understand Him and to become situated in pure devotional service. So, this is again a review of previous chapters, which Srila Prabhupada does many times in his first verse. And now he's introducing the topic of this fifth chapter. which is Arjuna's confusion, and ultimately, as Srila Prabhupada says in the beginning of the purport, establishing work and devotion because it is transcendental. Or even if you take it as just karma yoga, it's easier to do. This was one of the main arguments. Srila Prabhupada says that the impersonalists say that devotional service is very easy, therefore why don't they do it? Otherwise, if it's very easy and it's perfect, why don't they do it? Because it's actually difficult because of this very factor, which is surrender. If one doesn't surrender, then it becomes something that is very, very difficult. It's very easy to do. Surrender to Krishna, chant Hare Krishna, we all do it, we just did it. But to do it purely and perfectly, that is very difficult because of our rebellious mood. So anyway, those are some points on this particular verse. Stop here. Are there any comments or any questions? Yes.
I don't know what it said. It said one should not instruct one should not instruct somebody who's not a disciple. And but if that's so, then how does preaching go on?
In preaching, just like Krishna's preaching to Arjuna, he says, "This is my opinion. You can take it or not." Otherwise, you explain something, but you explain it in such a way that it's logical, it's understandable, you defeat their arguments. No. So you're not instructing them. You're, in the beginning, you're debating, you're discussing. Krishna is instructing Arjuna, but he, at the end, he gives us this option. Well, you can accept it. This is my opinion. You can accept it. Deliberate on it and do as you wish. So, when Srila Prabhupada says that you can't, especially if you can't instruct a foolish person, and you certainly can't instruct someone unless they are surrendered to you, means like, definite instructions. Do this, do that, do this, do that. One has to be in a surrendered position. But we can preach by presenting the philosophy logically, by discussing with people, and establishing the arguments of Krishna consciousness without just instructing them.
Just on this point, that's why Arjuna decided to become disciple, because he wanted this type of friendly conversation, or he found himself, that really emphasizes the distinction, that he found himself arguing against Krishna, and then he realized that my arguments are useless, I'm still miserable and confused, I don't know what to do. So then he made that decision to take the position, and it said Krishna was slightly smiling at that point because he was happy that his friend decided to become his disciple. But then Krishna's smile faded away and he immediately started to chastise. He couldn't have done that, he wouldn't have done that before Arjuna voluntarily took that position. Of course, becoming a disciple could also be like shiksha, could also be anyone who's senior who we respect, and as much as possible we would be submissive.
Yes, but of course, if someone is not in a challenging mood, then you have to just argue. You have to present arguments and logic and philosophy, and that's also preaching. To someone who's Arjuna was challenging, but he was attracted to Krishna. Sometimes we have to reach to people who are not attracted to Krishna, and therefore it's requires philosophy, argument, debate, logic, and that's part of preaching. And sometimes in spite of everything, people won't listen. Because if there is no submission at any point, then there's no question of giving them some instruction. Until there's submission, as Damodar Maharaj points out. When Arjuna finally submitted, and then as he's pointing out, it is pointed out, that Krishna wanted to make sure that this is not just word of, just lip service. We can say anything. But he wanted to show Arjuna that you really have to submit yourself. And then he began to chastise. Although he actually chastised him a little bit before. He was chastising him even before. But then, it was a mild chastisement. It was a pretty heavy chastisement, actually. But that's because he knew Arjuna was surrendered to him. And he had to clear up things by logic. Why are you're an arjuna? You're a qualified person. Why are you acting like an unqualified person? So there was some chastisement there. But it was logical chastisement.
I got in a little trouble. I think it was in Etayor. I get in trouble in a lot of places, actually. I think it was in Etayor where I said this is like Arjuna showing his human aspect. And it's, how can you say Arjuna showing his eternal associate of Krishna? But it's a very personal exchange. And the example I gave is that right after Arjuna surrenders to Krishna, he says, now I'm your disciple, his soul surrendered unto you, he's instructing. And then a couple of verses later, he says, but I ain't going to fight. Mm-hmm. So he surrendered, and at the same time he showed what I would call in quotes, like a human aspect there, where he was still, like, and then at the end of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls him on that. He says, and you're still going to say, na yotsya? I remember you said that at the beginning. How are you going to say it now, again, in the 18th chapter? If you do that, you'll be misdirected. So, anyway, it's very...
Well, I don't know who called you on that one, but by yogaṁ, he is assuming a human position.
I don't understand what...
By yogaṁ's influence, he is assuming a human-like position.
Oh, you don't know one of that, yeah. It's a very personal interaction.
Yeah, because if we see that he's always transcendental, he's always perfect, then that's almost the way to justify my Maya. Well, he was a pure devotee. I can't follow this. This is perfect. So you have to be careful not to justify the Maya by deifying. Let me deify Arjuna, and then, I put him on a platform which is unreachable, and therefore, because it's unreachable, okay, I'm perfectly justified to be in line. So another question, I thought I saw some hands in the back. Oh, yes.
Maharaj is saying that one rejoices in the self. So can you explain how that is done?
Said verse Vidyate savas Vidyate Vidaya Vandis Chidante Sava Samshaya Shiyante Karmaṇāṁ Kṛṣṇa eva manishvare. So it's explained in the Bhagavatam that one rejoices in the self, but Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that because the self is accompanied by the super soul, therefore rejoicing in the self